Hello, everybody. My name is Kurt Roskoff, and I am pleased, proud, and privileged to be a part of this, your TDC Today Show. And we're here with your co-hosts, Sue Roskoff and Denise Vargas. So, Sue, we're going to bring it over to you. Take it away for the TDC Today Show. Enjoy, everybody.
Welcome. So glad to have everybody here today. My name is Sue Roskoff, and we are here with the Disability Channel, or TDC, out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we are all about showcasing abilities. TDC is committed to providing digital quality media production services, education, and employment programs by and for persons with disabilities and veterans. TDC offers digital media production, video production, post-production, social media, and podcast creation, production, and support. TDC offers education and employment programming, which includes digital media courses to persons with disabilities who are unemployed and underemployed. TDC also offers community partnerships. Through partnerships and sponsorships, community partners and organizations become ability champions by supporting media created by and for people with disabilities. We are your USA team, and as always, I am so excited to bring in my co-host, Miss Denise Vargas. Welcome, Denise. How are you doing today?
I am doing fabulous. Super excited to be on the show again this week. We always have so much fun. Can't wait to hear what our guests say in all the comments.
Excellent. Well, and you actually had an amazing idea for a conversation tonight that I think is going to be uh, hitting a lot of points that will be close to home to both of us in different ways. Would you like to go ahead and introduce our topic for the night?
Sure. So we're talking about independent living and what it actually means to be able to live independently in your community. As many people with disabilities, unfortunately, that there is not enough accessible housing, and many of them are still living in nursing homes in the year 2024. Can you believe it? So we do need to do a lot of work to get more awareness out there, more legislation, more accessible housing for sure.
I think there's a topic with this that hits across the country. There may be pockets that are better at this than others when you look across our wonderful nation here, but on an overall, it's a mess. It's hard to get into the locations that you would like to be in. For example, I know you're a wheelchair user, right? What is it like where you live?
So my apartment is 600 square feet. Now the living room, dining room area is spacious enough, but ironically enough, the kitchen is a bit small. For a wheelchair user, if you need a lot more radius to turn, with our foot pedals, some people have extended foot pedals. So those are things that they didn't really take into consideration when they built the kitchen. It is a little tight. So the refrigerator is right by the sink. So when you open up the refrigerator, you kind of have to be on the side, and it's just very, very cramped. But according to them, it's wheelchair accessible.
It's some wheelchair accessible,
Exactly.
which apparently that checks the box well enough that it works, which
Yeah,
makes it really hard, doesn't it? Because
it really does.
there's a pretty wide variety of chairs out there. And I think as the time goes on and more and better modifications and different pieces that make using a wheelchair more independent based on however it is that you would be using, I've got friends that use like a joystick or, there's lots of different ways to make that wheelchair move and all the different features. I mean, you could have a manual chair or you could have the Cadillac of chairs. There's a lot of different things out there, a lot of different options I've seen.
Yeah,
And depending on what you get, whatever it is that you need, it does make a difference where you live and what you're able to do in your own space.
absolutely. Like even my bathroom. My bathroom, literally, when you're at the sink, the wall right behind me is maybe about 4 inches from my wheelchair. So you have to, like, All right, imagine you're driving a car, right? You drive. So you're driving the car and you're trying to get your car, you're parallel parking in a very tight spot. And you feel like, okay, I think I can get my car in there. But what do you need to do? You need to turn, reverse, turn a little bit, reverse, turn a little bit, go forward, turn a little bit. So you have to kind of keep tweaking that turn until you finally get your car in there. Same way with my wheelchair when I'm in the bathroom or when I'm in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness. What honestly, first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, realistically, how many dings are going to end up in the wall? Because it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you got a whole nother layer of things to think about with that.
Yeah.
And why am I gonna fix that right now when I might bump it again. It's not like you're trying to bump it, but if you only have like a 4-inch clearance, that's not much because how easy is it to actually see behind you? I'm sorry, but I can see the back of your chair is right up to the back of your head. So it's not like
Exactly.
in the car you have blind spots, but on a chair, I
Mhm.
think that's a pretty big blind spot.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And again, it's like I think that a lot of this could have been rectified had you actually used people with disabilities when you're building, when when you're sketching out an apartment. Well, ask us, what is it that we need? What would make a living environment more accessible, more maneuverable for you? Right? Like just ask us. But if you're having others build it based on what they feel is accessible enough, you just never know. And like I always say, Sue, accessibility is for everyone because we are all going to age into a debilitating state, if you will. We're all going to need help eventually. We all might need a walker or a cane or a wheelchair. You just never know.
As a gentleman nearby here has introduced a term to me a bunch of years ago called TAB, temporarily able-bodied. A lot of us are tabs, right?
Yeah.
We might be walking around now, but on the flip side, as I think about that, as you're looking at how do I get into a building, everybody can use a ramp, but not everybody can use the steps.
Exactly.
That's another piece of that whole puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So take this to that next level. What about being employed somewhere and they didn't necessarily take into account things again, like, accessibility, yes, on some level, but okay, are you going to have a job in a cubicle somewhere where you're doing computer and phone stuff? And how much space do you actually have? There's a lot of different pieces that go into that as well.
Absolutely. And what about the fact that you're gonna have to go to the bathroom when you're working, right? And oftentimes these accessible stalls are what makes them accessible is that the door is wide enough for you to get in, but there is no turning radius. The minute you get in, your foot pillow is right there, right by the toilet. How are you going to use the bathroom? And if you need help, only one person can go in there. Where is the other person that's going to need to help you be able to fit in that space?
So I would challenge everybody the next week when you're out and about and you need to use a restroom somewhere, take a look at what that looks like. Check out the accessible bathrooms. Some places might actually have a nice site. Yeah, honestly, the building I work in is a newer building, and there actually is a good size space in the accessible stall.
Yeah.
So you'd be happy if you're in my building. But I know there's other buildings within our same area there that I knew and not even close.
And
So
now,
take a look around.
absolutely. And now that you mentioned that, absolutely, there are so many great accessible bathrooms I've been to. And we even have our own sink in the stall, many of them. And I love that. But
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen that. And I haven't seen that. That's
oh yeah, they are fantastic. Now, for those out there listening, I do want to ask, while they're fantastic to be able to have the sink in your own stall area, it's great. But really, if you don't need that bathroom, um, just really don't use it. Because oftentimes we're waiting to use the bathroom. There's usually only one accessible stall. And I've been to many of them where while I'm waiting and they finally come out, it's someone that did not need that one. But it's big, it's private, it's got its own wash area. So yeah.
Very tempting,
Yeah.
but think about why it's there and respect that. Yeah, I'm guilty. I've done it before, but you know, if you really stop and think about it, you are so right.
Yeah.
You're creating a line that you didn't need to create, a delay for somebody else who actually it might take longer to use the restroom than it would be for somebody who could have actually chosen one of the other stalls. So yeah, why delay other people? That doesn't even make sense, does it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So that actually takes us to another whole level again. Okay, so we've talked about where a person would live and where they would work. Okay, well, I'll take myself for an example here. I have a friend that's local here that is a wheelchair user, and we had a big event going on at our house. He had to ask the very obvious question of, how do I get in your house? Yeah, how does he get in? He's in a power wheelchair. It's like a 500-pound chair.
Oh.
I don't have a ramp on my house. It's only 2 steps, but it's 2 steps.
Yeah.
What do? It's that concept of visitability. That was a new word for me. Being able to go visit your friends. Can
Yeah.
you even get into where they are? Oh my gosh. I bet you've come across that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's whether you have 1 step, 2 steps, you might as well have 50 million steps, right? Because even that 1 step, when you're talking about a power wheelchair, you can't just tip it back and push it in and that's it, right? It's very, very heavy. Um, it's unfortunate that even renting a ramp to be able to visit someone is very expensive. It's not something that's easily attainable. First of all, most people, even if they have friends or family members who are disabled or use a wheelchair, they don't think about how are they going to get into my house. It's on the one hand, it's interesting because it shows that I don't see you as disabled. That's why I didn't think about it, right? But on the other hand, it's like, wow, I didn't see you as disabled. How are you going to get into my house? Right?
Exactly. I even have a family member that's nearby that had surgery that meant that she's going to be using a wheelchair for the next couple of months. And I had a panic phone call about a week and a half ago from someone who's helping out, just saying, how are we getting her in the house? She can get home on Friday, but she's in a wheelchair now. How are we getting her in? And luckily, we do have a nice place nearby that sells ramps, and I was able to help connect the dots on all that. And again, luckily, there was an outlet of a place. Actually, I think they ship ramps like nationwide. They happen to be down the road. They are like 2 miles away from where we needed it. So we had that opportunity to actually help, and I said, take pictures of the steps, measure it, go over there, ask them what the right thing is. And they outfitted what she needed. And it's not a permanent kind of a ramp that was put on there. It's a temporary one, because the assumption is in a few weeks here that no more wheelchair if everything goes right. But that was that reality of you can't move back home until you can get in. How often does that happen?
Exactly. And like you said, we hope that everything is okay. But what happens when something does become a permanent disability? How do you retrofit your home, right? Because when we're talking about renting a ramp, it's not a cookie cutter ramp, right? It just really depends on where your steps are, how they are. Are there 2 steps here, 1 step? How far are they? How deep are they? how high are they, right? So are they straight? Are they in an L shape? So there's so many factors that would go into what kind of ramp do I need.
Yeah, that whole idea of tab, right? Again, temporarily able-bodied. At some point, that may be an issue for any one of us. That's for me, for anyone listening to this, that okay, you might be walking up the steps now, but that might not always be that way. What are you going to do? You got to start thinking about some of this stuff before it's an emergency, because that happens all too often of, okay, it's a flip of a switch. Now we got to pivot. There's that word, pivot, and figure out how am I doing this? And that's where you hope you have somebody in your network that you can talk to and ask questions and figure out what do I do, because it's a whole new ball game. I've never dealt with this. What do I do next? And I can only hope that everybody out there at least knows somebody that they can turn to and reach out. And worst case scenario, we're here. Reach out. We could do what we could do to point people in the right direction, because sometimes you just don't know where to go, right? Because
Exactly.
there's definitely resources around. I know within our county, there's definitely resources for where you can go to ask these types of questions too. Is that available by you?
Well, there are a lot of resources. And of course, one of the better resources are the Center for Independent Living. However, a lot of people don't even know about them. A lot of people just assume, oh, let me just call my, the county. They must know something. A lot of times they don't, right? A lot of times people who are there and who are supposed to be able to guide us in the right direction, they don't know. It's something that, again, we need more awareness about all the little things in life, not just the big things.
The little things are the ones that we're dealing with potentially daily, because once you're at that point where I need to get in my house, how am I doing that? It's an immediate, I need this figured out now. I can't wait a couple of weeks to kind of figure it out.
Exactly.
So yeah, and this actually takes me to that whole concept of the legislation that had taken place, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, that passed back in 1990, that did make a big difference for so many people, for so many places to be able to gain accessibility to buildings and whatnot. That was a huge thing. And now I know that, I don't know how many people have heard of DIA, the Disability Integration Act, that has been kind of floundering through the process and not passed. And that is the pinnacle of being able to have an individual decide for themselves
Yes.
where they're going to live.
Yes.
That's important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta tell you, as a person with a disability, I have been waiting for the DIA to pass. I love New York, not gonna lie. I grew up in New York, but I would love to be somewhere warm. I really would. Unfortunately, there are very few states that give you 24-hour attendance. And because New York is still one of them, I stay in New York. But now, once the DIA, hopefully, fingers crossed, it does pass, people will be able to decide where they want to live. They're not just stuck, if you will, in the state system, the help that they need. And at the end of the day, if this is all federal help, the law should be the same everywhere in the US. It should not be changing state to state.
That's a big deal. If you've not heard of the Disability Integration Act, DIA, if you haven't heard of that, it's worth taking a minute. It doesn't take long to do a quick Google search and look it up and see what it's really all about, because it truly does give a person the independence of making their own decisions on where they want to live.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, anybody listening to this, can you imagine being in a situation where you don't get to decide that? How you liking that? The number of people who have not been given that ability to decide and have been shuffled into a nursing home, for example, and now they're stuck there. How are they getting out? What kind of quality of life do they have because of perhaps a physical disability that they're not able to live independently on their own in their own house, but they could, given the right situations. It's possible. And that's where something like DIA would step in if and hopefully when it actually passes through the powers that be in our nation to make that happen. So if you're not familiar with it, take a moment and look it up. We all sit here scrolling on our phones anyway. That would be a good couple of minutes spent just figuring out what is it that they're talking about, because it's worth getting to know what that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I could take just a last, I know we're coming up at the end here, but I've got some fun news to share.
Yeah.
Yesterday, hot topic, we had our first adaptive ski event of the season. So it was an unusual day, actually. Usually we as a family are in attendance for the entire event. We were not yesterday. So it was so bizarre for us to show up after it was well underway. It just so happened it was the last day of school here where we are. So we had a half a day of school, picked up our daughter, and then went, because she's a huge help with these events. She really is. And the way the timing all worked out, as we got there, the last couple were on their way out and actually on the water at that time when we were getting there. So we did not actually end up in the water and helping like we often do. But we have more dates coming up. And I got to say, of all the times we've ever done these events, that was the windiest, waviest conditions I have ever seen for an event. It was wavier than what it was the night before when our own ski show got canceled because it was too wavy. However, this was magic. This was so good. Everybody went that had planned to go. We had the side skiers, we had the boat drivers, we had the people there that could make the event happen, made it fun. Even in the windy conditions, it just added to the excitement of what all happened there. And I'm so proud of what that organization is doing and what they have accomplished. And I'm so looking forward to our next events that are coming up later this summer. So I just wanted to share that there's a huge woohoo going on in our corner of the world because it was a great day.
I love that. And again, isn't that part of being able to live independently in your community? You would not be able to do that if you were living in a nursing home.
There's options out there. There are so many options out there. It's a matter of finding where they are and figuring out how to participate in them. And you're right, that idea of being able to independently decide for yourself that I want to go do that.
Exactly.
And then actually be able to make that happen. So there's so much to be said for that.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to turn it back to you. Any last thoughts you want to share before we close up?
You know, I all those who are listening, if you have any thoughts, ideas, you want to come on the show, we would love to have you. Reach out to us, let us know in the comments, subscribe, like, let's get together.
Excellent. I love the invitation. And yes, invitation stands. Awesome. So thank you so much, Denise, for being here. As always, love doing this with you. My name again is Sue Roskoff. This is the TDC Today Show. We are part of your USA team. We are so happy to be here. And until next time,